Yo, what's going on, Dragon Ballers? Welcome back to another deck profile. In today's video, I'm sharing with you guys my Majin Vegeta deck list for the start of set 11. There's a lot of really cool interactions with this leader and archetype, so I'm pretty excited to get into it with you guys. But guys, before that, if you are new here, make sure to subscribe, hit that bell so you don't miss a video. We're posting content 7 days a week now. It's pretty crazy. And if you guys are interested, check out the description down below. There's a bajillion links there. You guys can help out the channel. It really does help out a lot, guys. That being said, let's get right into the video. So Vegeta and Babidi, the leader. We have Overlord once per turn. Place one of your battle cards with Servant at the bottom of your deck. Draw one card. So this is still a new skill for a lot of us. I mean, it's kind of like how Unison was new in the beginning of set 10. Auto, add one card from light to hand. When this card attacks, draw one, and this card gets plus 5,000 power and double strike for the turn. So here's where I want to talk about this. A lot of people talk about this deck and this archetype as being like a hyper aggressive deck, and it definitely can be. Obviously, that auto is kind of unprecedented in the game, where you attack, take a life, draw a card, 20k or 15k double strike, and then the backside you get the 20k double strike, and that's really strong for being aggressive. But this effect actually says to me that this leader can actually play a somewhat mid-range game, because this is a leader that can inherently deal with unisons. You know, in a lot of these unison slayer decks, you have more of like your battle cards that help you deal with your unison, right? Unless you're like Zamasu. But even if you're Zamasu, you kind of rely on the Manaka encouraging presence to help you make your leader a little bit bigger to deal with those unisons, right? This leader on its own can pretty much inherently deal with unisons, especially the fact that it gets 15k. It deals with most turn 2 unisons. I like that a lot. I play it more of a mid-range game, guys. You know me, I love mid-range, and I think this leader works out pretty well. You can play it hyper aggressive, you could play it a little bit more laid back. I'll explain that as we get into the deck. So Awaken, untap 2 energy. Backside, once again, you have your Overlord once per turn. The activate main is now tied to an activate main instead of an auto when you attack, which makes things a little bit more awkward, because like you have to use the activate main before you swing with your leader. So if this was an auto, you could, for instance, attack, and then if they negate, you could choose to not take the life. But this leader kind of does force you to take the life to gain advantages. But the Overlord still gives you a little bit of a draw engine, which is kind of nice. If you feel like you're like in a risky scenario and you don't want to use the activate main, you can do that. The other activate main, quite good. Once per turn, pay a green. Look at the bottom card of your deck. If it's a Vegeta card, the energy cost of 3 or less, and the Servant skill, you may play it. Otherwise, return it to the bottom of your deck. And there are ways to manipulate that. Obviously, you have your Overlord skill to manipulate that, but also your super combo manipulates that, which we'll talk about in just a bit. So we're playing 4 Dark Broly, Overwhelming Evil. This is the unison that pairs perfectly with this deck. So he has base double strike. He's 20k for 3 tokens when he comes into play. He gains 2. Choose a card in your hand and discard it. If you do, your opponent chooses a card in their hand and discards it. Then choose one of their battle cards and KO it. And then the plus or minus 0 if your leader is green. Choose one of your opponent's using cards and remove a marker from it. So both those effects are pretty much always good, but the auto is the real kicker. When a marker is removed from this card by a skill, your opponent chooses a card in their hand and discards it. That's really, really good in the green mirror match, because a lot of green decks nowadays are going to be aiming to remove markers from your unison. But if you have this one in play, they pretty much get punished for that. But this card pairs incredibly well with Demon God Deborah. Deborah basically says you discard him, you take a unison marker off one of your green unisons, and you get to search for the 3-star ball, Parasitic Darkness. Why this is so good is because, one, it's an activate main where you discard a card from your hand. So when you're activating that in Deborah, your opponent cannot interact with it. It's really strong that way. It basically replaces itself for free by grabbing the Dark Dragon Ball, which is from your deck or drop area. So that's pretty much always live. That's why we play 4 copies. And when you remove the marker from your Dark Broly, your opponent discards a card. So I wrote an article earlier, I think it was actually last week, where I talked about explaining trades. This trade is astronomically ridiculous, because for 0 energy, you're, basically recycling a card, turning a card into a new card, but you're also making your opponent lose a card in the process. So for 0 energy, make your opponent discard 1. That's really, really powerful, guys. So really strong play the deck can make. It puts on a little bit of hand control early, but I wouldn't really call this like a hand control deck. I would call this more of like a combo deck that has a little bit of hand control built in, a little bit of aggression, something more along the lines of that nature. So for the rest of like the main stuff of the deck, this is what you're really mulliganing for. Not so much the super combo, but more so like the Babidi Evil Mind Snatcher and the Majin Quickening. So the quickening is really important when you add cards from life to hand, or if you place life in the drop area, you place cards on top of your deck underneath this card, and then activate main. If your later card is an evil wizard Babidi, and you place this card and 4 cards under it into the drop area, you play 1 green Majin Buu with 3 or less from your deck or drop area, then shuffle your deck if you look through it. So basically this is giving us a 3 drop for free. That's going to get us into the rest of our Buu chain. So we need the Buu that this thing spits out, as well as a Dark Dragon Ball, which we saw that Deborah searches for us. So basically 7 copies of that Dark Dragon Ball, and then 6 copies of the Majin Quickening. You're going to really want a hard mulligan for this Babidi Babidi. When you play him, you can either activate the quickening from the deck or look at the top 7 and add a Vegeta with the servant skill to your hand. So really good there. And then for super combos, we're playing 4 of the Great Saiyaman. This is basically the new draw 2 super combo that every single color is getting. What's really great about this super combo in particular is that it actually enables a combo for you in the deck. We read the awakened side of the leader a few minutes ago, and that said you can look at the bottom card of your deck. If it's a Vegeta, put it in play. Well, what does the Great Saiyaman do? It puts a card in your hand at the bottom of your deck, basically setting that up for you, which is pretty nice. So as we go on, we'll read the Vegetas that we're playing. We're playing 4 Mighty Strike Prince of Destruction Vegeta. This is one of the cards that tells me this deck can be played mid-range relatively well. It's a 2-drop 15k negate that actually becomes 25k when it's in play because of the servant skill. And then you look at the top 7, add 1 green unison specified cost of 3 to your hand, and then shuffle your deck. So a lot of times on turn 2, you actually want to be negating with this guy, which is stopping an attack, therefore extending the game unless you're up against like hyper aggro, and then it searches out your unison, which you want to play on turn 3. So I really don't like to awaken until about turn 3 if I can help it, because once you get your unison down, you awaken, you get 2 energy back to potentially negate again with another one of these cards, or make a few other plays that you have in the deck. Prince of Destruction Vegeta, Life and Death at 2. We have a 3-drop 20k double strike servant, auto once per turn. When your opponent activates a counter skill, switch this card to active mode. So kind of like Bardock the Resolute there. The reason we're only playing 2 of this card is because we never really want to actually hard cast this card. This is the card that we want to combo with our super combo, putting it to the bottom of the deck for our leader to then use its activate main to fetch this from the bottom of the deck and play it for 1. We never really want to hard cast this, although if there's a double strike shot for game that you have at your disposal, go for that, right? But generally not hard casting this for 3. And then Prince of Destruction Vegeta, Prideful Warrior, deflect triple strike servant, auto if your leader card's mono green. When this card's played, choose one of your opponent's unison cards and remove 3 markers from it. So the thing about this card is it's not really vital to anything that the deck does. It is a Majin Vegeta card, which is semi-searchable with the Babidi, but the problem with this card is it doesn't really combo well with your leader, because even though this is a Vegeta with servant, it has to be a 3 cost or less for your leader's awakened side to play it from the bottom. This is just a generic good card. I mean, deflect triple strike, definitely not a bad thing. This actually helps you against blue, where they have Godsling Technique Trunks. That's one of the cards they're going to lean into relatively heavily. So having a deflect triple striker, definitely not a bad thing. And if you really just need to remove counters from a unison, this card gets the job done, no questions asked. So it's a good card. It's not necessarily essential by any means, but it's a card that I've been liking and testing, and 2 is a pretty good number. You don't need it all the time, but the times that you do want it, it works out quite well. Next up, here is the kind of the middle of our Buu chain. So we have 3 Majin Buu looking for a fight and 1 Majin Buu Ghastly Energy. This is the ratio I'm going with right now. This could very well change. Basically, the thing is, 1 has deflect, 1 has barrier. So these are your 2 cards that are coming out off of the quickening, and the deflect is relevant for certain scenarios, the barrier is relevant for certain scenarios. The 1 Majin Buu Ghastly Energy is a little bit problematic because if it ends up in your life, you don't have access to it in that game in particular, which gets pretty unfortunate. But yeah, the ratios of this can change. Like if green is really popular, you'd probably play more of the barrier one to play around Frieza Charismatic Villain. But if blue is more popular, you probably want to play more of Majin Buu looking for a fight to get around Godsling Technique Trunks. So they both offer their pros and cons. I do like looking for a fights effect of just popping a battle card more so than Ghastly Energy, because sometimes they're not going to have a unison to remove a marker from, but generally they'll both be live most of the time. So the ratios there are very, very flexible. You can even play a second Ghastly Energy and keep 2 looking for a fight. I am playing 51 cards right now, so if you don't mind playing 52, you could definitely add an extra copy of Ghastly Energy. But then we have Majin Buu Dark Parasite. This is what comes out off of our Dark Parasitic Dragon Ball. Deflect auto. If your leader card's green, you choose one of your unison cards and remove a marker from it. When this card's played, choose one of your opponent's battle cards and unisons, remove a marker from it. Then your opponent chooses a card in their hand and one of their battle cards and places them in the owner's drop area. So once again, talking about trades, this thing is a great trade because it comes out for 0 energy thanks to the Dark Dragon Ball and the quickening. Like all this so far is 0 energy, which is pretty insane. I'll normally wait to do this on turn 4 if I'm not trying to be hyper aggressive, because once we have our unison down on turn 3, we activate the Bora to search our Dragon Ball. That's going to make our opponent pitch a card, but our unison is once per turn to use its skill to make them pitch a card when we lose a marker. So I'll usually wait for this on turn 4 to trigger Broly once again to make them pitch another card. That's how I kind of play it, a little bit more of a mid-range strategy, but still, your leader's double striker. You have a lot of big beefy attackers in the deck that come out pretty early. So you are putting on decent early pressure, but if you want to play a little bit more of a mid-range game, that's how I do it. I wait for this chain until about turn 4 if I can help it, right? So that's just me playing the deck. But of course, you can do this all sometimes as early as turn 2, depending on if you see all the pieces early enough. Majin Buu Royal Absorption and playing 4 copies because nothing really searches it, and we want to have it by the time we want to resolve our Buu chain. Once again, I usually do that around turn 4. You could maybe play 3 copies of this card and get away with it, but you don't have like a ton of draw power in the deck. So playing 4 copies to make sure you see it has been working out pretty well for me. Then we're playing 4 Frieza Charismatic Villain. Of course, you just pair that with Green Unisons. It's really good. Dodoria Brimming with Power. This is a card you probably don't see a lot, so counterplay. If your leader's mono green and you have a Green Unison card in play, if the battle card being played is an energy cost of 2 or less, it's placed in the owner's drop area instead of being played. Then play this card. I gotta shout out my teammate Andy for showing me the tech with this. This thing is great against cards like Dodoria. It's great against Gohan Baby's Minion, against like the Blue Baby matchup where they turn it into a 2 cost. It's just really good for cards like that kind of get in your way. It's been working out pretty well so far. And then when you do want to be aggressive, that card helps a lot. Finally, 4 Dormant Potential Unleashed. Obviously, you're pairing it with your Green Unison. It's very, very good. And then the 1 Cell Xeno. This could be a lot of different things. This could be the Primal Carnage SCR. This could be Smoke Dragon. This could be SS4 Gogeta. Whatever you have at your disposal that you want to play as an SCR slot. I don't necessarily think one's better than the other. I think Cell Xeno is good in this deck because you have like the 7-drop Buu with the 5-drop Frieza Charismatic Villain. You have a few other ways to make the math work, but it's not perfect by any means. I think if you have a certain one like S4 Gogeta or Smoke Dragon that are, require less setup, they can definitely be good as well. But guys, that was the deck. Hopefully I explained it decently well to you guys. If you have any questions, be sure to drop them in the comments below. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next time.